Well, unless you like bundling up and heading out on the ice, there are only a few short, precious months in which to while away a few hours looking for fish. So where are they? Well, if you're in the Regina area, Jason Matity can help you out. He's kind of a human fish finder, a fishing enthusiast and outdoor educator with getfishing.ca. And he's here with gear, too.
Oh, yeah. I brought all kinds of assorted things from hyper-aggressive.
Describe that for people. Hyper-aggressive. What is that?
Basically, what I have in my hand right now is this is a Rapala swim bait. And basically what it is it's a giant jig weighted on the end with a big, long rubber tail.
Wow.
And
looks dangerous.
Well, it's, you always have to be careful around hooks, for sure. But it's a really good way to get your day started if you're fishing for pike and walleyes. It's called a finding bait or a search bait. So fish will often, if they don't bite it, they'll show themselves and they'll come by the boat. And if you're casting,
why is it so effective?
It causes a lot of commotion down there. It's big. There's a lot of thump of the tail in the water when this thing swims through the water. And the other one that I like to go with too, it's called a crankbait or a minnow imitation bait. It's got a rattle and everything with it.
And that's like a much smaller metal shiny fish.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. And both of these are intended to be what a fish would eat. Bigger size. The one in my right hand's about 5 inches, and the other one's about 2.5 to 3 inches long. So you start aggressive is the best way to get going. Whichever fishing spot you go to, and if they're not biting on that, then you subtle it up. Either slow it right down with by pulling a small jig, which with the nice flasher blade on it, for some attraction. Put some bait like a worm or a leech on it.
Yeah.
And if you want to stop it completely, you put a bobber on that, and you just wait for the bobber to go down. So that's like super aggressive right to not aggressive.
Okay, well, let's back it up a little bit. Let's say it's, you're planning your weekend and it's early Saturday morning and you're thinking, I got nothing on my plate today. I want to go fishing. If you live in Regina, where would you go?
Well, and that's quite the first decision you have to make is what do I want to catch? And a lot of people are like, anything. Okay, well, fortunately, we have a few, offerings in that regard. The main target species in Saskatchewan, especially around Regina, are perch, pike, and walleyes. Mm-hmm. Lots of people like walleyes because it's the happy medium between a big, scary, bitey pike and a tiny little perch. Like they're good size, great in the frying pan, as all three of those are. Mm-hmm. But what you need to do is understand that as the seasons change, they move out of certain areas. Like they're super shallow in the spring, all those fish, they're really accessible from shore. But walleyes in particular get a little bit more challenging to catch, and you really need a boat to get outside of what I would call that weed edge. When the weeds start to grow up in the spring, the walleyes tend to like to run either right in the middle of the weeds, and they're hard to get, or on the outside. But you can still catch plenty of perch, pike, and even some walleyes from shore if you go to the right areas.
All right, so tell us where the right areas are.
Well,
right now, let's say that right now, next couple weeks.
Right, and the beauty of June's my favorite month because the fish are shallow and accessible to a lot of shore fishermen. And they're finished spawning, which they do in the spring to make more babies, so we could catch more fish, and they're super hungry now, which is the best part. So from shore, the lures I was talking about, like we're talking our lakes like the Copal Lakes, south end of Last Mountain Lake, Buffalo Pound is another great option.
South end of Last Mountain Lake.
Yeah.
So where specifically?
Like we're talking Craven, sort of north, all the way up through the Regina Beach area is very good for boat fishing and as well as shore fishing.
And you were telling me this is actually a top lake, okay? Last Mountain Lake.
Yeah, it's been in the top of the top 6 or the top 10 trophy walleye and pike lakes in North America. It's definitely been up in the honorable mention category. It may not have cracked the lineup, but it's definitely a destination where people want to come.
I was asking on Facebook about fishing, and Brent Sinclair says Last Mountain Lake by Rowan's Ravine, across from the barn where the fence runs to the shore. Great pickerel area. And then you get into that whole pickerel walleye terminology.
Yeah, which is a topic for another day, really.
All right, okay. But do you know the spot he's talking about?
Well,
by Rowan's Ravine?
Yeah, there's some really good fishing up there as well when you get later into the season. And you do have to go a little deeper for them too,
Yeah.
though. Yeah.
So you need a boat.
Yeah, you really do for walleyes getting later in the year, unless, as I say, you focus around. And I talked about the south end of Last Mountain. You've got the river section of the creek coming in, and a really good shore spot all year at Fort Qu'Appelle is those river sections between the lakes, because you've got some current flow, you've got some fresh water coming in, and there's always fish there of all species that you can get very easily from shore.
The lakes that you talked about, do all those fish, can they all coexist in one lake, or do you find that some fish don't coexist in the same lake?
It's not so much a matter of coexisting; it's more of habitat preference is what it would be. Like there's more, and even though Buffalo Pond is a really good walleye lake, there are tons of perch and a lot of pike because it's shallower and weedier than the other lakes. So if you want to catch perch, and if you have kids, I highly recommend you go to Buffalo Pond, because you can pretty much throw a bobber off of any shoreline at any point in that lake and catch fish.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. They're not big. You do get some that are maybe, in that 8-inch range that are great for the frying pan too. But if you want the action and you want the rod to bend and you want to sort of literally get your child hooked on this wonderful sport that I love to do, that's the place to do it. That's how I cut my teeth on perch.
Did you at Buffalo Pound?
Yeah.
That's one of the most exciting moments for a little kid, isn't it? When they catch their first fish, the look on their face, reeling it in.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the key thing is that perch fishing is fast because they're small and they school up quite heavily. Walleye fishing can be a bit tougher. You're sort of working for a handful of bites as opposed to multiple bites over the course of the day. And I think that's something for any parent out there that wants to go fishing with their kids. They're going to get bored if you don't make the rod bend. And that's why going for perch will help do that.
Yeah. How about trout?
You mentioned trout. There's a lovely trout pond actually at Buffalo Pond Provincial Park that they stock quite frequently. And trout, I love trout, but they're kind of jerks. And what I mean is that they're like the moodiest of the bunch, because when they give it up, they decide to bite, but otherwise they don't like to bite. And that's where you really refine a technique with like fly fishing and that type of thing for them. They do like to come up and bite flies and surface feed. They will, bite worms and these smaller baits too, but they're a bit trickier, especially when it starts to get really, really hot, Sheila. They like to go deep where it's cool. And often morning and evening, like really early, like we're talking now, and later just before sunset is a good time, because they tend to kind of get out of their slumber when it gets cool outside, and they'll come back up and bite.
And what's the story with those trout in Diefenbaker?
Well, the Diefenbaker trout, they did stock them, in years past. And they also have some wild ones that are part of the Bow River system and so Saskatchewan River system. But the story we want to talk about is back in the early 2000s, the former Sask Wheat Pool, who owned the trout fish farms, every year, like they basically have a net in the water where these trout live, these farmed trout. And the ice, when it shifts, will tear the nets to a certain extent in the wintertime. Well, they had a huge tear, and I think over 100,000 fish got out. And these fish are raised on pellets, Sheila, and then all of a sudden they see something that looks like a minnow, something they would eat in real, what their ancestors ate, so to speak, and they were just biting anything. And the ones that didn't get caught just became giants, because farmed trout are bred so they don't reproduce. So when all the other fish are spending a lot of time and energy, developing eggs and then going through the spawning ritual, these things just kept eating. So that's why, some really good friends of mine, they're called the Fishing Geeks Online. Anybody who's really into fishing knows who they are. They caught a 48-pound world record rainbow. And
in Diefenbaker.
In Diefenbaker. And these things are just massive. And these are the descendants, if you will, of that original group that got out, that escaped. They made the great escape.
Legendary.
Yes.
The stuff of legends.
Yes.
All right, Jason, thanks very much. You've given some really good advice. And if people want to share their stories about fishing, we'd like to hear from them too. People are posting. Phyllis Kuntz says Fishing Lake. She loves Fishing Lake in the Regina area. So post away. Let us know if you're willing to share your fishing secrets. And we'll talk again at some point during the summer?
For sure. And if any of the listeners have any questions, you can go to getfishing.ca, and we've got an email there, and we're more than happy to help you along.
Okay. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.